Hello, everybody, and welcome to the interview with Jordan Shelley. And would you like to say hello?
Hello, everybody. Good evening. It's very nice to be here this evening.
Brilliant. And what's the name of the little dog that's joined you?
Gorgeous little Storm, who sat behind me, who's a little Chihuahua.
Did I hear that this Chihuahua had done something amazing with regards to rodent control?
Yes, she's incredible. She overtook the Jack Russell as chief ratter, and is quite a profound rat killer now.
Wow.
She spends her life out in the barn chasing things. It's quite amazing, considering some of them are nearly the same size as her.
Yeah, they're all dog, aren't they, Chihuahua?
Yeah,
they don't. They may be small, but they know what they're doing. Right. Well, I'm going to kick this off, Jordan. Let's go right back to what were you like as a little boy growing up?
As a little boy,
were you a tremendously studious person?
No, not at all.
At school,
tremendously studious. That's definitely not what any of my teachers will have used. I used to spend most of the time walking my teacher's dogs, if I'm honest. And that would be how I spent most of my time, probably. I was very lucky to go to school in Henley, and we were right by the river, and so I used to take all the teachers' dogs for walks down by the river. That was basically how I spent my time.
Was this a boarding school? Or
it was indeed, yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Boarding school, yeah. So I went there from the age of about 13. I didn't finish. I left just before lower sixth. But it was the most amazing school. I had a lovely time and met some incredible friends there, and spent a lot of time walking dogs as well. But I was ready to go to work, and that was when I decided to move to Spain.
And was it so much a move to Spain or a run away to Spain? Did you just absolutely just pick yourself up and go, or was it?
I picked myself up and went. It wasn't planned, really. I mean, we were discussing it, and I sort of persuaded Mum that it was a good idea that I went to study Spanish. Or she persuaded me. I can't really remember what way round it is. And I knew out there I could get a job working as a veterinary assistant in a way that I couldn't here. So that was my aim, was I would go there and learn Spanish. I also had a dog at the time. My mum didn't know. And I'd rescued a dog down in Spain in the summer holidays and fallen in love with him, a little wobbly dog called Max, my wobbly dog. He was all, bless him, he had damage to his cerebellum, which caused like an intention tremor. That was kind of, how he looked the whole time. The sweetest little thing. And they said he wouldn't live more than a couple of weeks. And he was with me 9 years.
Oh,
bless him. It was such an amazing, and he was really the beginning of my journey into wanting to know more about dogs and wanting to spend my whole day with them. I mean, obviously I'd loved animals since being quite young, but he really was that catalyst, to wanting to go and learn more.
So I would expect that your parents spent a small fortune on your education and were hoping that you were going to do something that would be tremendously financially rewarding. How did they take this? I want to go to Spain, spend more time with the dog I've fallen in love with, and I want to be a vet nurse. Surely it wasn't exactly,
Yeah, I think you can imagine how it went down. I'm fortunate that they're very tolerant, which is, my mum and dad were very tolerant and loving. And so actually, although they wanted me maybe not to necessarily follow the path that I did, life is one of those things where things get thrown up at you and you end up going your own way, and unfortunately my dad passed away whilst I was living in Spain.
Oh no, I didn't realise that was the timing.
Yeah, so I was actually living in Spain when he passed, and I was 18 at the time.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, because I remember he'd been to my 18th birthday, and so he passed away that December, just before Christmas. It was
it totally unexpected? Was he?
Yeah, completely unexpected. I spoke to him on the phone the night before. He had a bit of a headache, but he was well. He had a medical checkup 6 months before, and the valve on his heart stopped working, just like that. And,
oh my God.
Unfortunately, he passed away very instantly, and me being a completely disorganized teenage boy, didn't even have a passport to get back into the country. It had been stolen and I didn't bother to renew it. Mum had been going on at me, bless her, for ages, saying, please get it done in case there's an emergency. I was like, yeah. Which obviously I should have done. But fortunately, they managed to get me back on emergency paperwork that same day. And then I came back and decided, I don't know whether it was a mutual decision to start with. I think I'd probably, if I'm totally honest, wanted to go back in the beginning, back to Spain, but decided that the best thing would be to be in England, and then started working as a dog walker in London.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Did you have brothers and sisters around?
I'm the eldest of 4.
Oh my goodness.
I'm the eldest of 4.
I knew there were others. I wasn't sure it was that many.
Yeah. There's 4 of us. So it's nice. We're a great little family unit. Lovely. We got on very well. I don't live at home, so I don't get to see them as often as I'd probably like. But I couldn't live in London. I love the countryside, and I love being out with the dogs all day. So, yeah.
So, did you bring Max back to London when you came back? Gosh, that must have been quite hard to do.
I mean, the best bit was actually probably before then, when I was learning Spanish, and I'd snuck him into my house where we weren't allowed dogs. It was a house share. I think there was about 6 of us, all students learning Spanish. And every time the landlord would come round, I'd get a friend to hide with him in the cupboard. It was great fun. And yeah, he was my little companion, really. The 2 of us travelled around Europe. It's terrible, I wouldn't do it now, it's quite dangerous, but he'd get on the motorbike with me. So I had a Vespa. And he'd sit in my backpack. So he'd sit in the bag, his little head sticking out, wobbling away. And that's how I get to him from the vet clinic where I was working. And yeah, great fun. I really, it was such a nice time of my life. And then moved back to England, and things kind of started from there. And it was a little bit longer after that we kind of first.
Oh yes, we'll get on to that in a second. So you're back in London. You can't, without doing a lot of training, become a vet nurse, I suspect. Is that?
Yeah, in this country, that's the case. Yeah.
Yeah. So you couldn't do the same work. So you decided to become a dog walker. So how did you pick up your clients? I mean, were there dogs you already knew? Or
some dogs I already knew, but a lot of it was word of mouth, walking around the area. You know me, I like to talk, so I would just wander about chatting to people with dogs. And by the end of my time working there, I think I was walking about 5 in the morning and 5 in the evening. Yeah, and that I really enjoyed, and it just kind of snowballed from there. Obviously, I'd worked with other dog trainers before and helped them and assisted them, and they were of the more old school persuasion, shall we say. And that was obviously where I learned what I learned. And I started doing bits of training for clients, because they'd say, oh, well, how come the dog does that for you and not for me? You know, that's the standard. And you go, well, it's just because I do it every day. But started to show people and demonstrate things, and that's so you really
were just practically doing stuff, really. And and you got a natural talent for.
I've been practically doing things from quite a young age. I mean, so the vet clinic that I worked in Spain, they'd known me since I was about 8 or 9. And that was when I was a little kid out there on holidays, bringing in every single stray cat, dog, pigeon, I mean, everything really, driving them absolutely bonkers. And so that's how I met them to begin with. And I suppose I've always been doing something with animals. I've always got some kind of a rescue creature living somewhere in the house. It's still like that now.
Yes, I've noticed the acquisition. but I suppose you were living in quite a wealthy area of London, so the dog walking that you were doing was probably for some really interesting people
very interesting people. And I was in like St John's Wood, Camden Town, kind of central London, around that area. And so obviously, it was very busy. And lots of people looking for dog walkers and dog walking. And I was surprised also how many people were looking for trainers, even though a lot of them didn't even walk their own dogs. But there we go. It was an interesting eye-opening experience.
So you got to know lots of different dogs and lots of different problems and lots of interaction with clients, really. So it was learning on the job more than anything.
100%. It was learning on the job, and all real practical kind of hands-on type stuff, which is my preferred way of learning anyway. I think I learn by doing, not even really by seeing or by listening. I learn by doing. I have to have a go before I can really understand the process, and I think that's just the way my brain's wired.
Okay. And had you been watching any television with dogs?
Yeah, I've been watching television. I was a very big Milan fan. Yes, he who shall not be named. I was very much one of his fans.
Well, Caesar began as a dog walker, didn't he? He began
for sure.
people's dogs, and he was grooming them as well, I think. And people started asking him for advice. So he was very much someone who developed his own method, I suppose.
When you're able to go and walk a load of dogs in a way that other people, they struggle when they're walking the one. They look at you and they go, how have you managed that? And then they do ask questions. They start trying to figure out what it is that you're doing and how you've managed all these different things, and then ask questions about behaviors. And my understanding of behavior then was from what I'd learned from him and one other military trainer. An old ex-military trainer, so it was a long time ago. Yeah.
And dogs in Spain, things are quite different from here, aren't they? The type of dogs that you meet in Spain, the native dogs, the breeds that
more like Podencos, like sighthoundy types, and then a lot of big Molossery Mastin types. Nice. Yeah, lovely. I've got one downstairs.
Yeah. And do people more likely have the dogs outside in Spain?
Yeah, and dogs tend to roam a little bit more. I don't know whether it's changed a lot recently, but I remember coming back here and having not really walked the wobbly dog very much on lead, suddenly being in a place where I actually had to be on the lead all the time. That was a bit of a culture shock. Yeah. Because in Spain, he'd just always be there. Like, we were wandering around and he'd just be there next to me. That was kind of how it was. With all the dogs, and I suppose that a lot more people there used to still kind of open the door and let the dog go for a walk. It still happens in the campo, but not so much down on the coast, where I was in Malaga. I don't think that happens anymore down there.
So how did you get your big break on television? Because obviously word of mouth that you were helping sort dogs out.
When word of mouth, so in the beginning, I actually worked with another producer first. We'd kind of, through a friend, had met, and then I'd been out helping him with one of his dogs in the parks, done lots of training and walking together, and he was really interested in making something. We worked on a pilot together, and then unfortunately he died of a heart attack quite suddenly.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, he was only 38. By the time I think I was... by the time I was 21, I'd lost my best friend when I was 16. She unfortunately committed suicide. My dad at 18, and then my first business partner. And it's quite a eye-opening experience for someone so young, I suppose. It changes the way you view the world drastically. And that's coming on to like the One show. That's why it always baffled me at the time when everyone was always saying, oh, but if I were you, I would have disappeared, or I would have, because to me, nobody was dead yet. And that was how I viewed it. I must admit, that was kind of and it's always been my sort of motto for life, is as long as nothing like that's happened, it could be worse, really, let's face it. And we just kind of crack on.
Yeah, my ex, Kevin, I don't know if you ever met him, the illustrator who does the magazine, his favourite phrase was, at least you're not dead yet.
Yes, I like that phrase.
And it, I understand what that means, but some people when they're in floods of tears, possibly not the best thing to say.
No. And I once said it as well on a stage somewhere when they were asking about my experiences of the One show and this and that. And it's really interesting because culturally, as soon as you talk about death, the room goes quiet.
Oh yeah.
Everybody goes silent. Death is like a topic that you don't really discuss. Whereas I'm quite open about it. I think it's quite important that as a society we talk about it more. I think that would help people.
I think you're right. I think that very often, if people haven't experienced bereavement, they really, really get very scared. They don't know what to say. They're very uncomfortable. And if you're the one experiencing the bereavement, you can misinterpret that as them not caring, because they really just want to get out of the room as soon as possible, because they don't know what to say to you. And it's just
or you get the other side, where people always ask you, are you okay, and how are you, and you go, well, how do you think I am? What a silly question. That's a bit bizarre. And so I think from that point of view as well, I know it's people only caring and it's what we're pre-programmed to say, but actually the best thing you can do sometimes is just say nothing and give someone a hug. These days we can't, which is unfortunate.
Yes,
but at least tell people that we love them, you know, and that's more than sufficient. The rest is kind of hot air, really.
And unfortunately, it's a club that once you're a member of it, you're a member for life, aren't you?
Yes.
And hopefully when you see it in other people, you remember how raw it was at the beginning, but it doesn't actually ever stop being raw. It just
and I hate the saying, like, time's a healer, because you don't heal. Time changes things. You feel differently over time. I suppose more of the memories that make you smile crop out than maybe more that make you cry in the beginning, you know. But saying that you heal, like, you don't heal after loss, you change and you develop as a person, and I think it's slightly different.
It becomes part of you, doesn't it, really? It's an experience that you wouldn't want to deny. It's part of your history, and it's I think it probably makes you more mature, because you've already dealt with some really, really shitty things that have happened to you. So in a way, it's a bit like, because Ian Dunbar's always saying that, isn't it, that the golden retriever that's never tested, when it first gets hurt, may bite hard, whereas a dog that's had lots of things happen to it learns to not bite quite so hard, because it's so if you've had lots of horrible things happen to you, in a way you expect it, and when it doesn't happen, I'm one of those people that goes around, because when like you have there, 3 things happen quite closely, it's very hard to trust that it's not just going to keep on at that pace, because I felt that nothing was permanent when I lost both my parents really quite suddenly within a relatively short period of time, a few years, but both before their time, but nowhere near as tragically early as you experienced. But it suddenly went from being, you don't even question that these people are there, and all of a sudden they're not, and it happens again, and you go, well, who next? And you start feeling everything's temporary, because you don't get. But the flip of that is, yes, it's temporary, so you may as well do your best and get on and
enjoy it as well. Life is so fleeting, and we spend so much time stressing and worrying about things in reality are not really that relevant. We may as well enjoy the time that we've got.
Live in the moment, because that's the thing. I always think the dog is why it's so happy is it doesn't hold grudges. It doesn't it's happy. I mean, it's just that's the way dogs are most of the time, is, they become content. And that maybe my anthropomorphic way of looking at it, because I just think, they don't have to worry these days. It's not like they have to go and hunt for their dinner. I mean, they've got everything on laid on for them. But that's when it all goes wrong, when they don't have everything. Let's get back to how we managed to meet, or not even meet, how I really very nearly ruined your life. Yes, you
shifting forward.
Yes. Oh dear. Yes, I heard that the One Show had a new dog trainer, and I was very interested, but I didn't see it before I heard about it. So that's the way I heard about it, was other people saying, have you watched it? Now, how did you get on the One Show? Come on. How did you get...
after obviously the first producer I worked with, I was chatting to a friend about what we'd made together, me and the other producer, and how I'd love to do some training and train on TV and create. Initially, my idea was like a documentary type thing, and I was really pushing for it. And he said, well, look, let's film something together. He was a producer and he worked at the BBC. And so that was how.
Was he your godfather as well?
No, very close friend, though. You're close.
Oh, right.
But
okay.
As good as, because he's like family to me. And that's initially why I hadn't said anything to him and approached him, was because we are so close and he's like family that, you know, you don't tend to want to pull on those relationship strings too often. And so I thought I would just keep plugging away. And once he'd heard and we'd chatted about it, he thought it was a great idea. And we worked on a pilot together. And that pilot footage was what was used as those little segments on the one show.
Yeah, because he must have seen it and thought, wow, that's dynamite, because it was, as your inspiration was probably the most successful TV trainer of all time, ratings wise.
Yeah.
To the uninitiated, the sort of being able to solve people's problems in a shorter space of time probably made great television.
Yeah, made great television. And I think also, like, when you look back on things, obviously the environment's slightly different now to what it was then. I think it was the first time there was a real proper public pushback against that type of methodology, if I'm honest. And there's still occasionally people that appear on TV with TV shows that now I shake my head at. I'm baffled, like, how they've got there. Anyway. That's neither here nor there.
I despair, I really do, because really, there's much worse now than there ever was, and I'm absolutely baffled by it. But I do, you know, I think we really need to sort this country out, don't we, Jordan? We need to sort it all out. Anyway, we'll get on to solving all the world's problems in a minute. But
yeah,
okay, you ended up with.
End up on the one show, and I had like these great segments. There was 2 or 3 of them, I think. There was the first one that went out that obviously was what dropped on your desk the next morning, and people going, hey, have you seen this guy and what he's up to? Then there was a second one that was released, and then after that, the campaign picked up. So the campaign that you started and spearheaded with quite a few people in the industry, but I know that Victoria, they were taking quotes from Victoria Stilwell and quite a few others.
Yeah, we I'm afraid, yes, there was quite a number of us. There was the charities, the Kennel Club. It was the early days of social media, and I'd written a blog, Cold Wet Nose blog, and unfortunately your name fits what we ended up with calling the campaign, Get Jordan Shelley Off the Telly.
The telly, yeah. That was the campaign group. There was Get Jordan Shelley Off the Telly. There was a second one as well, and
the second one. I don't think I was in that one, was I?
Yeah, no, there was 2. There was, you know what everything's like in Dogland. No one ever agrees with anybody. So there has to be 2 of everything set up. Maybe 3. Let's make it 3 just for good luck. And I, so yeah, the 2 of them were set up. The Daily Mail then started running articles. It was a journalist called Paul Revoir, who I actually have spoken to since, interestingly.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we had
in your hedge and jumping out at you, and
he wasn't hiding in my hedge. No, I wish he was, because that would have been very funny. But no, they sent photographers that were hiding in my hedge. So we had 3 people on motorbikes hanging around down the driveway for a couple of weeks. Yeah, and the Mail obviously ran the article, and then we're going to run a second, because I was advised by everybody, don't say anything to anybody, stay quiet, and it will blow over, and then you crack on, or whatever. I mean, that was kind of the advice, was just stay quiet, really, and don't get involved, don't talk to journalists. And then I read your blog, I think it was, to start with. No, what broke it first, actually, was Paul was about to send out a second article, which went into really slating the producer I worked with, who was a really close friend, and I was very upset. And so I rang him.
They went after him, didn't they?
I was upset that they went after him, because I didn't feel like that was very fair. Going after me for methodology At the time, I wasn't sure whether it was fair or not, but that's okay because I was the one on the telly. But to go after him and say that he used me in some way, when realistically, out of anyone, it was me that was using my relationship with him, I felt like that was very wrong. And so I rang him up, and then they didn't publish that second article, actually, which is quite nice. And then I read something on your blog, because you had the Cold Wet Nose blog, and I read, it's a shame people like these, or these types of trainers don't want to find a better way of training, or something along those lines. I can't remember it off the top of my head. It was something like that. And
I don't want to remind you of it.
No, I rang you up.
I didn't know you at all. I'd only seen you on television, and now I feel I know that the world of dog training, and you'll know this now, is quite like a village. And a lot of the angst was, we don't know him. Where's he come from? This stranger on our territory. And why is he on television? Because we can't get on television. So there were some people who were motivated by
the dog world is a very small place. I mean, let's face it, everybody does know each other, and it is like a village. You're right. I'm sure there were some people motivated by that, but a lot of people were motivated by the methods I've chosen.
Because they, you know, it's a bit like politics. There's a massive divide between positive and the old school.
And there's also some that sit in the middle somewhere as well, just to confuse things a little bit more.
and those fights are so intense that yes, there's more. You had stumbled into a hornet's nest, and you were blissfully unaware.
Poor 21-year-old me.
Wasn't you? Just thought, oh, I'm good at training dogs, and everyone you dealt with was very happy with the way you trained their dogs, and you were really good on the telly. You were brilliantly, you know, for your age, you were being all absolutely, you know, good at presenting. So, you know, you ticked every box, apart from all the dog trainers getting pretty much all the vocal ones. All some went, no, we're not having that. We're not having another season Milan, which was what they were saying.
That was what they were saying. Chaos did ensue for a certain amount of time, and then I rang you.
You did?
After reading your blog.
I didn't think it was you. I thought it was somebody phoning up, pretending to be you and being...
Because I remember the first time round you didn't take my phone call.
That's just me generally. I'm hopeless.
That's very funny.
I'm very unreliable. But yeah, I must have... I probably wasn't there, and somebody made it sound like I wasn't taking your call. But when you did, when I was there and I heard it's Jordan Shelley on the line, I suddenly went gulp, you know, because you're a keyboard warrior when you're writing blogs. You don't know the person's circumstances. And it was a while ago, wasn't it? How long ago was that? That was
9 years this September.
I'm hoping I'm not quite such an angry sort of person now, but I did.
Definitely not. He says, definitely not, agreeing and nervously laughing in the corner.
That's fine. I try and see, you know, the 360 and sort of try and understand. But being confronted by the person you've been writing about was like, oh my goodness, what's he going to say? Because really, I had just ruined your life at that moment. I mean, you've been promising TV thing, and
suddenly the rug was ripped out from under.
It was horrid. And you've got you know, tabloid journalists, you know.
And the hardest thing I think about the tabloid journalists wasn't so much for me, because I don't read any of that rubbish, but was because obviously it was in the Mail, so my grandma read it, and you know, upset grandma, that upset mum, and so from that point of view, that was probably more difficult for them than for me, because at the time I was just trying to figure out how to navigate my way through and do what I thought was right. It wasn't until afterwards, I think, that I realised.
It was because really the papers got more interested because, well, had you been just an anonymous poor person,
it was layers. There was lots of layers. It was they were frustrated. There was a layer of frustration between the Daily Mail and the BBC that's been there generally because they hate each other. That's like part of it. And so it was like jobs for the boys kind of thing that they were trying to get out.
Nepotism.
And then I think also when they started sending people round to the house I was living in at the time, which was my grandparents, they were trying to write a slightly different article, which was more about my own personal background. And that was just a slightly different, it was kind of quite out there and quite left field. Fortunately, they didn't publish.
Going into that side of things, you've been asked to take part in awful reality shows and you've always refused, isn't it?
Yes.
Made in Chelsea. They always
twice, but that's for different. Once was also as a dog trainer, and I definitely said no to that. Anyway, there we go.
But yes, you stepped into the limelight, and then you got all sorts of rubbish from lots of quarters for nothing to do with you. I mean, it was really to do with, a lot of it was just to do with who you were. Other people's fights got in the way, but my beef with you was merely Caesar Milan type things. Mm-hmm. So I was intrigued by what on earth was also going on, but more from a sort of like, oh my God, you know what's going on. So, but anyway, when you first phoned up, I was just absolutely gobsmacked to how brave you were, because to confront your critics is tremendously brave. And then there's most people just would brood and just hate that person and never ever want to talk to them ever again, and just be not very well, just write them off. But you phoned up and you were so sweet. You said some nice things about me, you said, and then you said, well, how do I find a better way of training dogs? And it was just like, oh bless, I just felt terrible that you were so nice. And
I think if anyone had rang me up and said, listen, I'll show you a better way of training, even beforehand, I probably would have done it. Just out of interest. I like learning. So I think, but especially then being confronted with all these people complaining and really not understanding why, I was baffled at this point as to what it was. Don't get me wrong, I'd seen the odd episodes of Victoria Stilwell, but even in those days, I'm talking like first series,
early series,
was still not positive in the sense that there was still like references to hierarchy and various things.
Yes.
So for the time, I was baffled at the time. I was baffled by it, and then you put me in touch with Ian Dunbar in America by email, who was so lovely. I can't thank him and Kelly enough for then deciding to put me up in their house in.
We should tell people who Ian is, because
Dr. Ian Dunbar. Sorry, I'm not very good.
There's a whole generation of people who haven't been experienced of Ian, because Ian was a British vet who thought he could save more lives training dogs than being a vet, and he was very charismatic. He still is very charismatic, and he went off to California to
San Francisco.
And became an academic, and he invented puppy socialization. I'm always saying that because I think it's true. I think we didn't have puppy training classes until Ian invented it.
Definitely not in the same format at all. What he brought to the table was this idea of positive off-lead socialization, and it was really quite incredible at the time. And he did a TV show as well on,
funnily enough, yes,
Dunbar with dogs.
Ian, when I was working at the Kennel Club, I was subbing and assistant editor on the Kennel Club's magazine, and it was very stuffy and it was very boring. But there was one article by somebody I'd never heard of, Dr. Ian Dunbar, and it was how to train your dog not to sit. And I thought, oh, that's a bit odd, isn't it? How to train, and it was all, and I think it was one how to train your dog not to come back, and it just twisted everything round, and you suddenly saw things in a different way. And I thought, wow, this is revolutionary. And then he came in one day, and he came in to see the kennel club. Is that you that made that noise, or are we being?
I think we had a motorbike go past.
Gosh, it's quiet where you live, isn't it?
Yeah.
And he thought, you know, bless him. It was we were all naive in those days, but he'd had a meeting at the kennel club, and he was hoping they'd be interested in positive reward-based training. And it was back it was almost the Victorian era then. And he'd had lunch with the secretary who didn't really, you know, know anything about dogs. And he thought he came into our editorial office shaking his head going, oh, well, that was a waste of time. And we became friends. And I just went, wow, you know, you're brilliant. And he gave me a copy of the Serious Puppy Training video. And it's very elderly, this thing now. And I don't know if you've seen the shirts that Ian was wearing. He was wearing horrible Hawaiian shirts, and it was
doesn't surprise me.
It's very of the 1970s. It was
very funny.
It was.
Did he have a big beard as well, like mine at the time? Yeah, very beardy.
It was, you know, everything about it was, you know, it's a bit like the Big Lebowski, or I can't say that. You know that film, but it was, you know, it was so surreal watching it. But the science of the dogs playing together and the puppies, I'd never seen puppies. I'd never seen someone do the law method, make the dog sit and lie down, and it was all hands off. And it was like, wow, you know, he's from the future. And I had this video, and I don't think anyone else had it. It was, I don't know. In those days, no, Ian was relatively unknown in his own country. He was very famous in America, but nobody really had that much to do with him. And I had lunch with a TV producer. Why? I don't know, because I was very lowly at the Kennel Club, but nobody else would talk to anybody. I ended up swinging a lunch with the TV producer who'd done a whole series about dogs, and she said she'd already got a dog trainer. She wasn't interested in dog behavior. And I went, watch this video, and I gave my Serious Puppy Training video away. I never got it back. I'm just still upset about this. And she ditched her whole series and made Dogs with Dunbar.
And Dogs with Dunbar, wow, what an amazing series.
On Sunday, ITV, prime time. And the only TV person who'd been on before that was Barbara Woodhouse. Rather, I'm very old, I really am. But Barbara.
What year was his show then? That was.
What was that? Sorry.
What year was his show?
Oh gosh, that would have been in the late 1980s.
Okay.
But yes, and
it turns out he filmed a lot of it not far from where I now live. He filmed a lot of it down in the New Forest. So we were talking about it the last time I went out to see him, and he says, "Oh, I love the land where the animals roam freely," which is what he calls a forest, and I love it down here too for that very reason.
Well, the lady who was the producer, this was the most, because she'd gone from making quite niche programs that wouldn't really get much of a go to her show was top rating Sunday primetime television with Ian, and it kept going. There was many series of it, and for a while everything in the dog training world was all rather warm and rosy, because this was a revolution. We were having this new gentle way of training that was good television as well. And but Ian was, you know, he liked the sun, didn't he? He liked being in California, so he would only make his series, then he'd bugger off back over there, and so his marvelous life. So things were happening over here. The Association of Pet Dog Trainers began, and the people were suddenly throwing away their choke chains, and it was like, you know, I feel like I was some old hippie or something, remembering how we changed
the
things.
Positive revolution.
Yeah, and even some of the positive people still were, you know, looking back, were being quite. Yeah, there was training discs that made a horrible noise, and you threw it on the floor, and you know now I'm saying that's not positive, but it was all new, and there was everyone joined together, and there was but there were camps starting even then. There were some people who quite liked being able to shock a dog still, or do something else aversive. So it was, but in ascendance were the positive people, and
it was him who got back, and he really changed my life.
Well, yes, Ian, who I found was a tremendously, because I used to then bring him over to do I'd book halls and things for him to do his speak, and it would always be sold out. And he'd actually spend the whole time talking about cows or something. And it was very funny. And people didn't mind that he often didn't talk about dog behavior or dog training at all. But he was very inspirational. And he when he came over to see his mum. And his mum stopped talking to him when he got divorced from his first wife. And he adopted my mum because my mum would still talk to him. Because he'd been, even though he'd been silly. So, as in mother's terms. So I've always regarded Ian as a bit of a member of the family, really, as a superstar. But I've always felt like he's sort of somebody I could tell anything to, because he always turns up and always, he's always sensible. He says a really good thing. So when you said, well, how can I find a better way of training? I thought, now, if I was to be adopted by anyone, I would like to be adopted by Ian Dunbar. And I thought it's a big ask, but
So you sent off my adoption papers?
Yes. I offered you up and said, he's a nice boy, and he really wants to learn, and it was like witness protection, wasn't it? We sort of, you were the most famous face at the time in our.
Surreal. Like, the weird thing was driving down my driveway, the little men jumping out their bushes with their cameras, the most bizarre experience. And I've been hiding, by the way, and using a neighbour's drive to persuade them that I wasn't home. I've been climbing a fence and using their driveway instead. Then driving through that, turning up at the airport. I remember ringing you at the airport when I was about to leave to say, look, I'm on my way to America. And I was explaining as well all the funny people jumping out the bushes, because you wrote a very angry post to them all. I remember. And then got on the plane, and next thing I knew, I turned up in San Francisco, and there was Kelly waiting to pick me up from the airport. And just the most surreal experience. I suddenly turned up there. I think the first night they put me up in a hotel just in case I was a weirdo. I stayed in a hotel the first night. And then after that, I moved into the house. We were there for a little while in Berkeley, then went down to the APDT conference. I think it was San Diego. And that was amazing.
That was when you realised that this wasn't just a UK story.
Yes.
Because everybody there recognised you, didn't they? Because they'd all been following the story.
It was really weird. All these people were coming. I mean, I'm at this conference in America, so I'm on the other side of the Atlantic, and all these people are coming and saying hello. And if I'm honest, I think it was followed a lot more than I thought in the States at the time. But I didn't understand the huge crossover in that dog training village that we all live in, and the crossover between the UK and America is huge. And we all share a lot of friends online. I mean, like half of the people that follow me are in the States, half of them are in the UK, and I go out there and talk now. I love it. And I think, that was a real interesting experience.
But what was nice though was I found that the positive dog training world were very, very welcoming towards you. So they went from, trying to, ruin your life to cheering you on.
I was surprised, like when I got there, so we went down to the APDT, and one of the first people I saw there was Victoria Stilwell. And she said to me, "Oh, would you like to have a coffee?" I said, "Yeah, I'd love to have a coffee." And she was so apologetic. And we had such a lovely conversation. I'm so glad that we've been friends ever since. I mean, and she's been very supportive over the years through messages and whatever, and we chat, and we went to the Animal Hero Awards together last year, which was great fun.
Smart. I was very impressed.
I was actually out of my wellies and tracksuit, and I had a trim and everything for that one.
Very good, very good.
Yeah, I look very smart.
She's lovely, Victoria. And Victoria had all sorts of crap as well at the beginning as well. And still, the dog world is not very nice. I mean, people are are quite cruel to each other, and
Yeah.
I think
but you find that actually, what I've always found anyway is that people that seem to have made it in the industry and are well known, they're all really lovely.
yes,
It's only people that are bitter for whatever reason, and it's usually their own reason, that aren't, if I'm honest. I mean, like, Ian took me under his wing. Victoria was lovely. It was when I first met Grisha Stewart, and she was doing her first talk on that, and the two of us hit it off immediately. We've been best friends ever since. I think, you know, and everyone was so kind. And when I came back, so there's more in America, but also when I came back to the UK, people were also really kind here. I mean, even Steve Mann rang me up and said, mate, come for a coffee, onwards and upwards. And that was kind of how it was. Everyone was very kind and supportive and helped guide me, which I'm very grateful for, because they didn't have to.
Well, I think that's the thing. I think everyone was just impressed that, you know, and I think it was quite, everyone was quite evangelical about this. It was sort of like, if we can save this chap from becoming an equally popular Caesar Milan-esque British version, you know, wouldn't that be amazing? I mean, we get you back on the telly being positive, with methods that won't, you know, everyone can sleep at night.
Well, I liked it. You wrote an article not long afterwards. I think it was Phoenix Rises or something was the title. And your end line of the thing was, get Jordan Shelley back on the telly, which made me giggle.
Well, you know, I think that's the thing. And because you, in a way, it was like you went to university, only you went to the University of Dog World Life. I mean, you've spent time with some of the greatest experts in this field. In a way, you wouldn't have got anywhere near as many people if you hadn't have been seen as someone everyone wanted to help. You know, because I remember some people were really quite bitter about that. They were going, "It's not fair. I've always wanted to meet all those people. Why is it happening to Jordan?" And you know, I've read all the books. I've done all this, and
it was interesting. What I also found interesting as well was how many aversive trainers came out after the fact. So after I'd already been to America, they weren't supported during the whole campaign that was set up against me, but waited until I'd gone and learned and studied, and then came in to bulldoze me afterwards. I found that interesting. That taught me a few lessons.
How do you get on with someone now who is an avowed dominant?
Very well. I don't. That's it's up to them, their own choices and their own. I'm not one for pushing things like that on other people. I tend to just go by showing my success with dogs, you know. So often I find it with clients, like they'll turn up with these preconceived ideas about what they want to do with their dog, and it's often aversive, and I don't usually correct them. I usually just show them what it is I'm doing, and they see it work, and they're like, right, we'll have some of that. And it's really that simple. I think if you spend time arguing or fighting with people, you're not really going to get anywhere. I'm not convinced it was the campaign that got me to cross over. I'm convinced it was the assistance I had afterwards.
Yes, I absolutely, because I don't think
if I'd been left where I was after that campaign without meeting anybody, I reckon I would still be an aversive trainer today. Possibly, there's more chance. Whereas having met all those people and them really investing that time and effort into teaching me, I think, was what was really valuable. And I think it's the same with others, you know, even with other trainers that I meet that are aversive trainers now, you know, if they say they can't do something with a dog, I'll just show them it work. And they go, wow, that's amazing. How do you do that? And you just show them. It's really that simple. And they go, great. And I'll buy some more of that success, please.
So do you think that there is, because, well, when the world you discovered wasn't terribly obvious before all that happened, do you think that in a way it is still quite a closed world, the dog world?
Yeah, what we don't realize is we live in, I mean, I'm sure some people do, but we live in echo chambers on social media. 100%. They're these algorithm-based echo chambers where all you hear is what you want to hear and what you want to see. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of people out there that are completely unaware. And for some reason, aversive type training and trainers seem better at promoting their content, their free content. And I don't know what that is. I don't know why, but that's an observation that I've made, and I would love to try and change. You know, and there seems to be a lot more content out there, and you have to travel a little bit and explore a little bit before you discover that positive training bubble. But I do believe that the tide is turning in this country in particular. And things are becoming more and more positive based.
Because I think we've talked about this, how confusing the dog world is, because everything's initials, and everybody's got initials after their name, and
there's acronyms for everything. You could do the whole letter, the alphabet, and every single letter, and you make some kind of organization. It's very complicated, or some kind of training method.
I did a survey where I listed all the training organizations, all the initials, and then I made up a load as well and just put them in. And I asked people to tick the ones I knew, and people were ticking them, the ones I'd made up, as well as the ones that were real, because, to be honest, nobody can hold that in their head, all that information. And
doesn't surprise me.
It's like, well, you know, we kind of all understand what a GCSE and an A level is. Some of us are O levels, but you know, for dog training, there's no recognised qualification that the general public can look for to know definitively. But
not definitively, no. That's why it's. I mean, there are pushes in the industry to try and create. The only thing is that they have created different camps, and that is somewhat complicated, but there are pushes in the industry to try and make it a little more clear cut. I don't know whether it will succeed. I'd like to think that it would, but I suppose we'll see.
It would be nice to have something that's sort of coded in some way, so that at least you can see this is someone who, no matter what, would never use this method.
Well, there's the Dog Training and Behaviour Charter that's just been announced, which incorporates a number of organisations, which I think does that. And then there's the ABTC, which is another load of letters, but the ABTC is an umbrella organisation that I suppose does, it does give people a certain amount of surety that they know what they're going to get, you know.
Yeah.
But it is, you're right, it's complicated, and it is, sometimes you feel like you're drowning in, what was it someone said to me the other day, I feel like I'm drowning in alpha spaghetti, or whatever it is, you know, and I was like, it's true.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Because, you know, somebody's initials could have been got online over a weekend without ever actually being seen by anybody, and someone else may have spent 4 years, you know, studying.
And that doesn't even begin to look at all the different types of training methods there are that also have acronyms and letters and this and that, and it's just like, for the average person, it's mind-boggling.
Yeah,
like they look at it and go, all I want is a dog that's happy and well behaved.
The thing is that the academic side of it is academic, because if the person is good at exams, doesn't necessarily mean they're good at putting things over to people and to dogs. So you could have someone who's, you know, on paper brilliant, but actually can't teach, because really the whole thing is you have to be a bit of a psychologist, because you have to make it fun for the human to become a better dog owner.
Well, they have to want to engage, and that's not always easy, especially when you have people come with preconceptions of what training is. And I think it's owner engagement's huge, and that's really what will change the dog's life. And so if you can't engage with the person, then you're going to struggle in dealing with the behavior of the dog, because it's often, you know, all interrelated. Dogs are like big ecosystems that have so many different things surrounding them that impact them. You know, we spend a lot of time, I work mainly now doing focus workshops, so that's around like dogs around focusing around live animals, so because we live on the forest where there's loads of creatures and things, and reactive dog workshops. And it's amazing how often people are coming to me so totally confused with everything they've been offered, because there's just so many acronyms, so many different names, and so many different organizations that people don't really know when to start, and they spend a lot of time looking at well, let's like look at triggers, say, and so they look at, oh, the dog reacts when he sees another dog, but they don't say, well, what's the dog been through his whole day? Like, has he had a stressful day? What's he had for breakfast? What hasn't he had for breakfast? Was he poked up the bum by the child? You know, there's like a whole load of things that come before seeing that dog that make you react. And so it's not just a matter of working through setups. It's also about being able to understand the dog's life, the person's life, and how you can make changes. I mean, in some cases, I've managed to make changes in the lives of people and dogs without actually doing any setups. And the dog's then comfortable around other dogs all of a sudden. It's just because you decrease the level of stress or the level of pain that the dog's in. I mean, there's loads of factors.
And I think that's the thing, is some people are drawn to a career in dogs because they don't like people. Mm-hmm. And this is not going to work if you want to be a dog trainer, because really most of it is people.
I'm contemplating going to do some kind of a diploma in psychotherapy. Because I feel like so much of what I do is actually about changing people's behavior as well as the dogs, and sometimes changing their expectations as well. I think that that's a really huge thing, and so that's somewhere on my list of the many things that are on my list. But it would be very useful.
That would be very good, because I think that's the thing, is that you've got to make it fun for the person. And also really you are making as you say, you're making their life so much better. So if you can offer them the all-round sort of, you know, life coach that you can go in there and sort out all their problems.
I mean, the amount of times I've turned up to train a dog and they've rung you and said, oh, you know, my dog hates my husband. And you get to the house and go, I think it's you that hates your husband.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you say that politely? But really, the dog's just feeding off what you're feeling. Yeah, and that's a big one too. So
I must admit, when I used to have I was very close to a dog that had been very ill when it was little. And Sally used to come to work with me all the time. And there was someone I worked with who I wasn't a good boss. I wasn't very good at, you know, being stroppy with people and telling them off. I mean, in my early days, I was very good at telling you off, but now on a one-to-one basis, I was not great on confrontation. And I was building up to tell this person off. And then all of a sudden, my dog picked itself up and went over and bit her dog. And I thought, oh my God, you know, the dog is so in tune with me, because it wasn't normal for her to do that. But yes, dogs do pick up on what we're thinking and what we're feeling. And yeah.
For sure. And they listen, if they can detect types of narcolepsy and epilepsy, we have all these different scent changes in our body depending on how we feel, and they know 100% of it. I think it's really important that we take that into consideration.
Yeah,
they know.
It is an amazing bond. So have you got a very good bond with all the dogs you've got at the moment? Is there a special?
Loads of dogs. The special one sat next to me. I can't really have a favourite. That's not fair. Stormy and I think she's been with me the longest. The little Chihuahua who's sounder next to me. And then, you know, I have this big old Spanish Mastin called Nana. And Nana Bear she's beautiful. And she's a very special dog. It's difficult to say, because then the Jack Russell's a character and I love her. She's absolutely bonkers, but I love her. And same with the Shepherd, who's a nutcase. And same with the Big Bully. He's also a bit bonkers too. So
quite a variety there.
Oh yeah, variety is the spice of life. It's like the variety pack of dogs. And they all came to me for various reasons. I mean, rescues and whatever. And you know, I never really chose any of them. They all kind of chose to come live with me, I suppose. Yeah, they're all lovely. I can't really have a favourite. And I love parrots. Bizarrely, though, people always think dogs are my favourite animal, and they're not.
Ooh.
What do you think my favourite animal is?
I think you're going to say parrot.
No, it's a duck.
Really?
Yeah, I love parrots, but I love ducks. I find ducks fascinating. I could sit and watch ducks all day. Is that really weird? I love them.
Weird. But
we have pet ducks in the garden, and honestly, I could spend hours watching them. The way they scratch their little heads, and the way they do the funny little dance when they haven't seen each other for a little bit. They do a funny little head bobbing dance. It's great fun to watch. Don't get me wrong, I love the parrots too, but the ducks are something special, in my opinion.
I don't think there's ever been a TV program about ducks, has there?
I'll be a duck trainer. There we go.
There you go. Wait, have you ever thought of getting a duck tolling retriever? You get Nova Scotia duck tolling retriever. Yeah, but you'd probably hate that because they'd be, you know.
I was going to say I don't need any help rounding the ducks up. They all come over for a cuddle anyway, so it's okay. Yeah, they're very tame. Very tame. Very sweet.
Pretty idyllic.
Yeah.
So Jordan, what are your plans? Because I do feel like I've adopted you slightly. You know, I want to know where are you going now? Because I think you should be on television, and I've after my trip to the States and everything else, I hid in my house for a while, just rescuing dogs, which taught me loads of things, and that's kind of what I spend most of my time doing, if I'm honest. I stopped counting at 300 foster dogs through the house. Wow.
Yeah. I stopped counting at 300, and we've definitely. I'm 99% sure we're pretty close to the 4 figure. Yeah, and we've done loads of dogs. So I've loved that, and that's in the last year or so, I think, taken a back seat to my teaching. Really, and that's what I spend most of my time doing. I love it. I wouldn't do anything else. I'm lucky because the COVID and the lockdown and everything else that we've had has kind of made me reevaluate. It's forced me to reevaluate anyway what I'm doing with my time and how I teach. And so instead of doing groups like I did before, I now only do one-day one-to-ones with people. So they're all 4 hours long, and we work on the things that I enjoy doing, and that's it. So I either have dogs that are reactive in some way, or that struggle when they're surrounded by loads of other creatures and that need help and some kind of focus with their owner in that kind of environment. And those are the things I enjoy doing. We might do another one for, I'm trying to think of a polite way to put it, but teenage knobheads is all I've got, really, because they do kind of hit a stage where, just like people, especially the boys, they become a teenager. And that's fun. And so suddenly all that hard work that puppy owners have put in their puppy classes, and they spent ages trying, it all just goes out the window. Because the dog's sense of smell kicks in, his hormones kick in, he's like, well, hey, I'm off, and that's it. And it's around that time when people really need some kind of help and assistance. And so I think I'd like to try and write something for that. And that's really that, and growing all my own food is what I started doing in lockdown, which has been so much fun. I can't tell you, I've really enjoyed that. I think that's all I really want to do. I love it. Don't get me wrong, if someone came along and said, Jordan, would you make something nice and pretty for TV? I might.
I want to make television with you, because I think we could do some fantastic things that would I want to, well, I'll go on about this one. But we do need,
well, next year in September will be the 10-year anniversary of the One Show. I have an idea for a documentary that I would like to make on the 10-year anniversary of the One Show. So who knows? Let's have a chat after this.
Yes. I put my hand up for that. Yes. And I don't mind admitting how my part in your downfall. So.
But no, it wasn't a downfall. It was your part in my creation, I would say. You know, there's no such thing as an end to a story unless you want it to be an end, and it was the beginning for me. It really was. I don't get me wrong. They were over the first few years, kind of like adjusting, and it did make me question what I was saying when I spoke more, which sometimes maybe is not a bad thing. But other times, obviously, you get a bit unsure after your whole world was ripped apart. But you know, you build up, and actually I love what I do, and I wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't for that. So, you know, I have to say thank you, I suppose.
Well, you know, I will start up the campaign, get Jordan Shelley back on the telly. we'll keep doing that, because I do think you've got a lot to offer. I think you're very good at communicating a message, and now you know, that's what we need. We need someone who makes good telly,
I think, you know, going to America, learning everything I did and everything I learned about dogs hasn't necessarily made me want to be able to tell you, but it's made me really also try and understand myself better as a person, I think, and understanding behavior from a dog's point of view has made me try and understand my own life, I suppose, more. If it wasn't for a very long conversation one evening with Grisha Stewart about my fear of crowds, I had a terrible phobia of crowds, you'd never know it now, which was caused from my dad's funeral, actually, because there were so many people there. And it was because I did something akin to bat on myself at a few outdoor festivals that I managed to get over it. And it's really interesting because I think having had some of the experiences I have as a person allows me to translate sometimes what the dogs are going through in a way that other people will understand. Because it's all well and good throwing acronyms at people, but unless they can empathize and sympathize, they're not really going to truly understand why you're doing things differently.
Talking about acronyms, explain to the viewers what BAT is, because
behavior adjustment training.
BAT.
BAT. Yeah, it's a behavior adjustment training. And if you go and have a look at Grisha Stewart and all her videos and her book, I mean, there's loads on it out there, but it's basically a way of empowering the dog and changing the dog's behavior by allowing them to make the right choices and setting them up in a way that they make the right choices. But I could sit and talk for hours about this, and I don't know whether we have that time. But I really think if you haven't, I would go and have a look at it, and, you know, that, and there's a few others that are really useful. But I think, you know, like anything in life, all these different techniques that are available, they're a little bit like a buffet, and you have to choose like bits and pieces on your plate that suit you and your dog, as long as they're all my opinion, as long as they're non-aversive and they're all kind, caring, ethical techniques, then you should go through and use a plethora of things that make you and your dog comfortable. It's not about just sticking to one rigidly because that's all you know and that's all you want to know, that's all you want to do. It's about actually choosing the things that are right for the dog and spending some time occasionally just stopping, breathing and turning around and asking the dog how that was for them, and then maybe reevaluating and mixing things up again.
The one thing we haven't covered is your you did a lot of you had a lot of photos of breed specific legislation.
Oh yes, there's lots of photos of me campaigning outside Parliament against BSL, and I was very, very interested and very much in touch with everyone when there was the EFRA committee going on in Parliament. I attended a few of the sessions, and I was actually away teaching in America at the time of the last one, so watched the whole thing live at the wrong time of day. I was in the middle of the night and I was shouting at the machine from America.
It's the one I watched. It did really feel like something might happen because
it did. So just before I left, it felt like we were really close to changing the law, to maybe bringing about a space in which it's okay to be shaped in a certain way as a dog, and actually it's all about owner education and the individual dog's behavior rather than necessarily what breed or type they have. That's the other thing as well, is a lot of people say breed specific legislation. There's nothing breed specific about the legislation. It's type specific legislation, and that's one of the vaguest like groups that you can, like a type of dog. It can be anything that's mixed together that looks vaguely like that dog. It's just absurd. And the fact that DNA doesn't stand up in court, you can tell you've got me now. The fact that DNA doesn't stand up in court, it infuriates me.
It makes no sense, does it? I mean, that's the thing. It's tape measure instead of people using their brain. I mean, if we did it to people, if we went around measuring people's noses and saying, oh no, this man's got a very short upper arm, therefore he must be a criminal, you know, they'd be laughed out of the courts. But we do dogs. You know,
and if the purpose of the law was to make people safer, it's been proven just simply by looking at the increase in bite statistics and fatalities, that it does not work. And the only thing that will work is education, both of owners and of children in schools and of parents and the whole plethora of people that are in this country. Everyone needs an education on at least a basic understanding of dog behavior. And I'd love to get into schools and talk to kids that are scared of dogs even, and just let them understand what the dog, then there's nothing to be afraid of. You know, we're only afraid of the things we don't understand. And as soon as you understand it, it's not so scary anymore. And that would be so nice. If there was a real push for education-centric legislation when it came to dog safety, I think that we'd be in a much better place as a nation.
Well, when I spoke to Mr. Cooper, John Cooper, the QC, I mentioned to him that in other countries they do things differently, and we've ended up with this weird thing where the dog's guilty until proven innocent, and even we don't seem to see that the owner
in Spain. We don't see the owner at all. And in Spain, when I was there, and we were down, particularly in the Andalusia, because I know that each area is slightly different. I know that in the province of Andalusia, a dog over a certain number of kilos, I believe it's like 20 or 25, must be on a lead and whatever in public. And I think that's sensible. I know that might upset a lot of people that have big dogs, but actually I think, you know what, that's quite a sensible way to move forward. Let's get rid of the breed specific part of it. And let's say realistically, dogs over a certain size can cause more damage because they're just physically bigger. And so in public they should be on lead, but that doesn't negate the need for education, because most bites are on children at home, so we need to educate. It's vital. Like, it really is.
That's been the problem, is that people acquire dogs for status, and then they don't realize that they needed to gentle their dog. They needed to make them be safe around their own family, and they just don't understand that. Yeah, you've got to bring the dog up right, and if you lock it outside and then you let it in unsupervised, yes, all sorts of horrible things can happen.
And just like to leave a child and a dog unsupervised. I mean, there was that awful one in the caravan in the southwest long ago.
Oh, that was horrible, wasn't it?
That was horrendous. But to go out and to leave a child on his own inside a caravan with a dog he didn't know that has a history of just the whole thing was mind-boggling and really upsetting.
It's very often the way things are reported as well, because what we don't read about is the number of times parental supervision has led to an accident that didn't involve a dog. And we don't know, but you know, there's that book that did you know that slippers and balloons kill more people than dog bites? And when you start looking at the statistics, yes, the most terrible things happen when adults don't supervise their children. And there are terrible things that can happen if you're not actively supervising, and that involves swimming pools, ponds, other accidents in the home probably account for very many more deaths than them opening a door and a dog that's never been used to being around kids.
If any child was to come visit, I have friends come over with their kids, they're always supervised. Like, it's not even just around the dogs, even if they're around the chickens and the ducks, they're always supervised. Like, and it's for everybody's safety, not just theirs. It's you know, and I think that's a really, when you look at the actual statistics and you understand where the dog bites are happening, that's a really important message to drive home, and just to educate people on what dogs are often really like shouting at you. Like, I see it all the time, and it's so upsetting for me as someone that can speak dog, and you walk down the street or you see a video that someone's posted online and their dog is sat there shouting at them to try and do something differently, to try and be slightly calmer, to try not, and they really are, all the different calming signals are coming out and they just miss the whole thing. And actually, if we had that education in schools from a young enough age, that wouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, it's so true. I remember looking at this. There was a case in France where a baby had been killed by a German Shepherd, and that the way the French had dealt with it was so different than the way our media deals with it. In our media, when things like that have happened, they very often get the mother on the sofa and everyone's obviously tremendously supportive.
Oh, and they choose the worst photo of the most gnarly stock image dog as well. It's never the actual dog.
Yeah. And it's always unexpected. And it's the dog that's seen as, well, a demon, really, that somehow or other, the dog is totally to blame and the people aren't. But in France, what happened was they took the German Shepherd away for evaluation, and they examined forensically, which never happens here. It never happens here when this sort of thing happens. They looked at why this happened, and they discovered that the person who wasn't the mother, the person who was left to babysit, had been drunk and had fallen asleep, and the dog and the baby were unsupervised, and they were unused to each other. The woman was prosecuted, the dog was rehomed. Now, that would never have happened in this country. No. The dog would have been put to sleep immediately. And
the dog would have been shot before the court case. Like, it would have been that, and that then takes out all the evidence.
Yeah.
So you can never really get to the bottom of what actually happened without a proper forensic investigation.
So many times this happens, that something awful happens, and it's shoot them or kill them immediately, and then work out what happened. And you never really. Kendall Shepherd, lovely Kendall, who's a vet and a behaviourist, and is an expert witness on this, is just, she's on call, ready to go to any of these scenes, and she wants to examine forensically what happened so we can learn and we can stop it happening. But we never do that in this country. So we always just then go, oh, it's those demon dogs, and it's very easy to hate the dog. But really, the dog's a dog. You've got to remember, it's a dog. It's got teeth. It's up to us to make sure everyone's safe. It's responsible adults.
And I think for some reason, culturally, it's a relatively recent thing. I think that as dogs have come more and more inside the house, they're roaming less and less. They're viewed more as a little furry person.
Fur baby,
yeah. Rather than actually being a dog. People almost seem to forget that actually, just like any person, any human, you poke even myself on the wrong day. If I've had a bad back and a migraine, and you poke me on the wrong day, chances are I'll bite your finger. And I think it's the same, like we kind of expect the dogs to be always like cute and fluffy and just like that little teddy bear fur child on the end of the bed, when really they're a living sentient being that has feelings and emotions and has a whole however many years worth of history that they've learned things from, and their genetics, and there's so much going on in there. We really don't respect them enough as the animals and the individuals that they are. I think it's quite important. Because moving away from that's caused, I think, some of these issues. Like, people just don't really think about the dog ever doing anything that they wouldn't assume it would. They're all cute and fluffy, and
it's the Disneyfication of them. Really, there's this idea that without you actually training them, they're somehow or other, like a super nanny, and they're going to be, instantly going to love our new baby because what we love. That's all. Yeah, because most dog people are really, really careful when they have children to make sure they're never unsupervised, even the best behaved dog.
I was really blessed with working over the past couple of years. Previously, I've worked with some good friends of mine, Gavin and Jeanette, hello if you're watching, Muldoon, and they are the most amazing parents as well. And I don't want to jinx it, he says, touching wood, but watching their kids grow up around a house full of dogs like mine, there's animals everywhere, and how well educated they are, and how kind and compassionate, and it's all just from education. So it's just from getting in at an early enough age, making sure they don't poke and prod and they don't touch things, when they shouldn't, and they always ask permission first. They don't just walk up to strangers' dogs. And now they're the most beautifully well educated around all animals. And I think if we could just get into schools and do the same thing, the world would be a much kinder, more compassionate place as well.
Yeah, I think many of those life lessons would also help them to become good parents themselves, because I think that's something with us all. we've all tended to move away from, we all used to live, pretty much in the same place for generations. So we all had people to learn from around us, but we've become quite a lonely society where lots of people don't
very
have
insular and societies, but that's probably part of the reason, and I could go on for hours about this too, that society's quite broken.
Yes.
Yeah, like we've become very insular. I don't know whether you've ever read much about the rat park experiment.
Oh no.
Where they took Mr. Ratty and they popped him in a cage on his own, and they gave him the choice between water and cocaine water. And when he was in the cage on his own, he became a really bad coke addict and was very antisocial and was, it was quite depressed. And given the choice again in an environment where there was other rats and there was like socialization, he then managed to kick the addiction and didn't want the cocaine water.
Wow.
So it's very interesting. With a lack of stimulation and a lack of things to do, a lack of interaction with one another, I'm sure it drives people towards addictions and negative, or what we perceive to be negative behaviors, and sort of that feeling isolated and detached. And I think that's very much because we've lost a lot of our kind of community spirit and our togetherness, which I think is quite important. And there's not always family groups, but familial groups, of your close friends. And I think that they're very important pieces of the jigsaw puzzle. But it's also important to relate that back to dogs. And actually, dogs need that stimulation. They need that. And another big thing that people don't take into consideration often is just they need some space. Like they all need their own space. Like in this house, we've got creatures everywhere. They all have their own little like hidey holes in space in different rooms and different places. And that's really important, because without that, I think they will feel on top of each other. And space is a really valuable resource. And head-butting only tends to happen over resources, let's face it. And that's what it's all about in houses of multi-dog households. It's usually some kind of resource, whether it's the person, the food, the space, it's about something. And so it's just making sure that everyone's fulfilled, the animals, the people, I think it's big.
Wow. Gosh, who'd have thought we'd talk about
We've gone slightly off these, I suppose, but it's been great fun.
No, I think it's just fascinating hearing your views on things, and I do think it's interesting to see. You say you weren't an academic child, but your view of the world now is you're very interested in so many things. You're acquiring knowledge all the time.
It's really fascinating. I didn't really get into learning until I stopped having to learn. It says a lot, really, doesn't it? I mean, until I didn't have to learn, then I started wanting to learn. And I used to hate reading. I'm often got my head in the book now. And that, I think, just comes from being able to choose things that I was interested in. I was never going to be a mathematician or an English teacher or a history teacher. I was always interested in furry things outside. And once, I suppose, I was able to go and get involved more in that, I suppose my learning kind of increased. I always do wonder if we'd had an option of psychology or sociology when I was at school. Because we didn't at my school. If I had, whether that might have piqued my interest. I always think maybe that might have done. Because even then I was fascinated in like the way things learn and progress. And so I think I would have found that interesting. But yeah, now I love learning. It's really important, and that's, I think, something that experience taught me as well, was that we never stop learning. When you think you know all of it, chances are you know absolutely nothing.
You get so much confidence at the beginning of something, and then the more you know, the more you know that you don't know it all. And
the further I delve into the world of like animal behavior, the more I realize I don't know. I mean, don't get me wrong, I do it every day, and I read it every day, and I live it every day. But you're always learning something new, whether it's from books or from the animals that are around you.
No, that's good to hear. I think COVID has taught many parents as well that the things that we thought were important school-wise are really not important at all. I mean, once you get something massive like this pandemic, there's sort of obsession with exams and just cramming to be able to sit an exam seems all rather pointless, doesn't it? When you sort of, what a waste of people's growing up. Why couldn't they experience lots of other things? Because it's not that we have to retain all our information in one place, because we've got Google now, haven't we? I mean, the era we're growing up on, we can look things up.
I would much rather have learned to cook and to do my taxes than about parallelograms. And it would have stood me in much better stead. So I think, and from that point of view, I think that the education system is geared towards turning people into academics. Well, the majority of people aren't going to be academics. So actually it should be geared towards something else, but that's a whole different.
Yeah, it's a biggie, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a whole different rabbit hole.
Yeah, but it does seem mad that we jump through hoops for because practical things are more important. We've learned that now, that it's the practical things that keep us alive: food and shelter and medics. And
I just think I think hopefully people have learned like the value in each other, like that time away from each other, and that value in each other, and how much we all value having a hug. Like that really, I was doing perfectly fine with the whole thing until I went to visit my grandma and I couldn't hug her. And that broke me. Up until that point I was fine. I was fine throughout the whole of the lockdown, the whole everything. And when I went to go and visit her afterwards and I couldn't just give her a hug and a kiss, that was really hard. And actually I think just being around people, being in their presence, loving one another, spending time together, it's more valuable than any amount of money or physical nonsense or paperwork that you get. It just is. Just people are so valuable, and we really ought to value them more. Yep.
And also in lockdown, dogs have probably been the biggest winners, in that everybody wanted a dog in lockdown. And
well, I don't know whether that makes them winners or not.
No, it was news really, because the prices went up and up and up, and the people who started cashing in were the worst people, and there were some terrible scams going on where people were taking money for dogs that didn't even exist, and oh dear, and where people gazumping each other.
And I read as well something that Mark the vet, wrote. And obviously all his campaigning for Lucy's Law and to end puppy farms, and I think in the last few days he's really trying to push now for some kind of change to the early importation of dogs, because I think that's huge. I really do. And when you see, like in this country, it's illegal to dock and crop, which is very important. Then instead of to get around that legislation, people are just buying in dogs that are cropped and docked from abroad, and it's so wrong. And that shouldn't be young puppies. It shouldn't be allowed to happen. And transporting dogs before they've gone through like their fear periods and their key socialization. I mean, that trauma is just, Anyway, it upsets me.
But I'll put a link to the petition when we do the podcast.
You should, because it's I think everyone should sign it.
It's really going well. I mean, I think it's only 3 days in, it's on about 30,000 signatures, which is really fast. So it's hopefully showing the government that this is something that very definitely needs fixing, because we're starting to become much more aware of the sentience of farm animals, and dogs are being treated in the same bulk import way. And there was that awful case, did you see the puppies that went to the Ukraine, where there were so many loaded into a plane, and there was a huge number of them froze to death, and they were like sardines. I mean, it was just awful. And you're saying, well, why is Canada importing a plane load of puppy farm dogs? I mean, surely we should care about the provenance when we because
100%. And it's not, dogs don't need to travel that far. There's more than a sufficient amount already waiting for a home in here. I also have a foreign rescue dog, and this is going to open a can of worms. Here we go. I also have a foreign rescue dog, a big Spanish Mastiff, and I know the breed very well, and that's why I got one. I know I met her as well, and I just think we have to be very careful about bringing in loads of dogs from far away, be they puppies from puppy farms or rescue dogs, I think that I'm not saying don't do it, but I'm just saying take your time and really go and understand and meet the dog and understand the environment they're coming from and the environment they're going to need to succeed, I think is really huge. Because if you take a dog that's lived not just its whole life, but generations and generations, and, you know, it's known to be slightly flawed, but they say it takes 12 generations to domesticate a fox. So if you have that number of generations and generations roaming in a feral kind of state, chances are it's very much ingrained in their epigenetics. It's very much a part of them, and that needing that freedom is very much a part of them needing to be happy. And often you see dogs then stuck in between four walls, just detesting life, and it's not fair. And I think that's really important as well, is looking at the individual and understanding what's right for them, not just because it's cute in a picture on the internet.
So you're so correct. People fall in love with a photo and their brain turns to mush, doesn't it?
Yes.
I mean, it's just awful, because they're going to live with that dog for years and years and years, hopefully. And to be just falling in love with photos, it breaks my heart, because no matter how much education people have, the way we are wired is that we look at a puppy and it's got
big cute eyes and you go, oh, cute.
No matter how much you know it's wrong, people still go nuts. And that's the thing, is we need things in place that make it easier for people to do the right thing. And one of the ways of sorting this out is saying, look, it's now illegal to, in England anyway, hopefully soon Scotland, some soon Wales, to have third parties selling puppies. So no pet shops, no online retailers. So why would you allow lorry loads or plane loads of puppy farmed puppies into the country? I mean, a customer should be able to say no, that this is wrong, because that every load we bring in subjects another generation of mothers to slavery. And
I also do worry as well about rescue puppies being bought in for really high donation levels, and it does make you wonder.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting for a minute that there's any legitimate charity that brings stuff over that's breeding dogs to bring them over, but it does make you wonder what's going on some of the less legitimate van loads that are coming in, you know, and you just see all these really cute dogs that it's bizarre. Like, where have they come from?
Well, even the most reputable, you can see it from someone else's perspective. If you're in a place where there are lots of stray dogs, and you know that a really, really successful rescue would take this one in front of you if it was pregnant, rather than an older dog that is just hard to home. Well, the temptation's there, isn't it?
Yes.
To make more rescue dogs.
And I don't want to upset anybody, because I'm sure I've got friends that are listening that run rescues from that rescue dogs from other places, and the rescue dogs here. I don't want to upset anybody, but I do think it's really important that we have this conversation open and honestly, and without it turning into, because it always does, it always boils down to, oh, well, all dogs should be rescued and you're just a racist, racist person. I get that a lot, and I'm not racist against any dogs from other countries. What a bizarre thing to say. I have a load. I just think that in a lot of cases, those dogs would be happier either in free roaming sanctuaries, or being spayed and neutered and released, or maybe in the limited number of homes that are here with people that are experienced enough that know what they're doing. But there's a limited number, and it's not your average family. You can't just dump a street dog on your average family. It doesn't work.
You need to have very, very special homes for these, because very often the most damaged dogs are the ones that get all the attention, and then people will go to the extra yard to save that one dog, because you can change that dog's life, and you feel that if you left it there it wouldn't survive. But there is a middle ground where people fall in love with photos and don't realize how difficult it's going to be, and there's huge numbers of dogs that go missing because they the dogs are so completely disorientated, and as soon as they take the slip lead off,
they're off.
the transfer, they're off, and they must be so confused as to what on earth's going on, because they've just no experience of this country. And yeah, I do think that that's perhaps.
No, I see, because I would also argue that a lot of the dogs I saw when living in, say, Spain, that were free roaming were a lot happier.
Yeah, but
and they were a lot happier than a lot of dogs here. So yeah. I kind of question, don't get me wrong, if they were in an abusive scenario, if they were locked on a yard, maybe not. But the free roaming dogs in lots of countries I've seen, actually that's what they are, that's what they've evolved for. That's their point within our, like, their ecosystem, you know, and we've completely forgotten that and dragged them away from it. And actually sometimes that can be damaging. It's obviously slightly different to, say, Storm, the little chihuahua who sat on my lap, that generations of sitting on people's laps she's got in her, you know, and that's a slightly different story than all those generations living on the streets, scavenging and hunting. And also on top of that, having to be afraid of men just to survive.
That's a very good point. Yeah.
Generation after generation, having to be afraid of men just to survive. It's in there. It's innate, because otherwise you wouldn't survive.
Yeah. There was a book, I remember interviewing the author. There's a Canadian lady called, and it was a surprise bestseller. It was something, The Secret Life of Dogs, or something it was called, or The Hidden Life of Dogs. And it was, all she did was she had a like a husky type dog that she could not keep in her yard. It would just escape, and she decided to find out why and where it went, and she observed all it did, and she was just blown away by the detail this dog had and the life it had when it was, because it had been astray, and it knew how to cross roads. It would walk down from the corner and look both ways. It was a super intelligent dog.
Have you seen the videos of dogs in, you see it a lot in, like, Southeast Asia, where the dogs are smart enough that they've clocked if they pretend to have a broken leg, someone's going to stop and pick them up and feed them. It's amazing. And so they'll be walking, and if you film them early enough, they'll be walking perfectly normally, and they see the rescue people come along and start limping. It's fascinating, and they've learned that actually gets them the most attention, more than the other dogs, and it's a learned behavior. And dogs aren't silly, you know, they're really not.
And I think that's the thing, is that the ones that survive in those situations where they have to beg for food and they have to avoid being run over, they evolve being very, very clever. And very many pet owners, owning a clever dog is a curse.
And I personally think the biggest reason I see, or the majority of cases when I see dogs that are reactive and fearful, it's because of a lack of ability to make choices in their own life. And so if you take a dog that's had that ability to make all those choices and suddenly take all of them away, how difficult must that be? Because I'm seeing dogs that don't know what those choices were in the first place that are struggling. So the ones that do, no wonder they find it hard. And then you've got to spend ages and ages educating the people about how to understand what it is the dog wants, and how to let their dogs make choices, which people aren't very good at. They're very good at telling dogs what to do, but not very good at letting the dog tell them what they want.
Yeah. No, it was fascinating talking to you, Jordan. I could talk all night.
We should do it more often.
Jordan, yes. When this nasty COVID thing goes away, we'll get back to having. Yeah, you can be
real life.
My co-host on this podcast. We'll
be fun.
Set you out there with a camera. Right. Well, thank you, Jordan. Is there anything you want to say that we haven't already covered?
You know what? I don't even know really where we've been, where we've gone, but it's been great fun. I've loved it, and we've chatted so much about dogs, a little bit about, like, my story. I don't think there's anything I particularly want to add, unless there's anything you do. And if anybody wants to come down and join me for some dog training, they're more than welcome. They can find my Facebook page. The website's under construction, which is a famous phrase. I think I'm famous for saying that. It's been under construction for many years. But I have a Facebook page, Jordan Shelley. If you Google or Facebook me, it will come up. And all the details for all my workshops are on there.
Well, it's been lovely catching up with you, Jordan. And I'm so pleased that you phoned me up all those years ago. And I'm glad
you took my call.
Well, you know, I'm very proud of what you've become and the journey you've been on, and I really do love that people were so nice and friendly and encouraging.
It really did show the best of the dog world. It really, and I if I could implore everybody in Doglandia, just like if somebody seems like they need help, there's more than enough dogs for all of us to train. Like there really is.
Yes.
So just help them and show them and do stuff. Like it's not, life's short, just enjoy it.
Exactly. What a fantastic message to end on. Thank you so much, Jordan. And I hope everyone was able to see us, because we're not on Facebook. We're over on Zoom, so we don't see. So you may have all been asking questions. We've just been taking.
We have no clue. Yeah, completely oblivious. But it's been great fun.
We're going to go off and yeah, probably have a drink and yes, we've been at this for 1 hour 40 minutes. This is
Blimey.
It's gone in a second, but let's hope people are still watching.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you, Jordan, and let's do it again.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I will continue to follow your career with tremendous interest. Thank you so much, Jordan. All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.